hello, everybody. Welcome back to those who were with us yesterday on day one. Welcome to those who are coming to us for the first time today on day two of this Hausfeld and Bickel hosted event, Our Future in the Balance, the role of courts and tribunals in meeting the climate crisis. So we had a wonderful day yesterday. Those of us here who enjoy football had a wonderful evening last night. Please forgive slightly croaky voice, lots of shouting. But during the course of the day, we had many brilliant interventions, and we're going to hear some reports back from the workshops that happened at the end of the plenary yesterday. And those reports will help us get to some sort of conclusion about the event itself, but do bear in mind this is all leading towards a declaration that we want to draft and present to world leaders at COP26, a sense that the law matters greatly in safeguarding our future, and we want to see both the law used to effect this transition we need, but also to hold to account those that might be in the way. Now, last night I did some institutional thanks to Hausfeld, in whose offices I am at the moment, and Bickel, who did so much of the preparatory work for this event. But I just wanted to do a personal thank you to people, to Michael Hausfeld in particular, and to Ivana Alanya. See you in the final, Italy playing England in the final, who did so much of the good work to help us get ready for this event, and also to keep the momentum going, to keep the work going so that we can do something useful with all this brilliant input that we're getting over the event. Now, there were some technical difficulties last night, apparently, in the workshops, for which we apologize. We know that happens, and many of us have lived on Zoom and other devices and you know, modes of communication over the last year, and there were one or two difficulties for which we're sorry, but we got good input, and we're going to hear about that in due course. We're going to review what was said and refocus today. And two ideas I'd like you to hold in your minds during the course of the program. A lot of the legal action we're talking about is action to stop something bad happening, is to prevent further harm. It's designed to confront abuse of power. It's supposed to propose some kind of adjustment to the ordinary way of doing business, and to do so in a way that is in the public interest, but also might help advantage solutions to climate change. And I want that to be part of the story too, as we discuss things today, that it's also the law is there to help start things, to open up space, to reshape markets, to provide better flow of capital, ideas, resources, technologies into the solutions that we need. And we should be hearing more of that during the course of the day. In due course, we're going to get an intervention from Joe Stiglitz, who'll pick up some of these themes. And then also, we want to be able to be completely on top of the developments in human rights, and to think hard about the language that human rights offers us, the power in that language. Indeed, some of the points that were made yesterday are designed to help us rethink and repower the language we've had to deal with climate change issues, and we need to get our heads around that. Language is critical. Language is the essence of our humanity. It allows us to express ourselves to the fullest extent, and it allows us to give expression to change consciousness, which we also talked about yesterday, and to make decisions differently because consciousness has been changed, including in our courts of law. Overnight, there's been a lot of Twitter activity about the Australian case, Sharma. You might want to have a look at that. Maybe that's something we could put in the chat so that people can see there are successes happening. There are things moving on. That case has recently come to an interesting moment, and the successful plaintiffs got their costs, which is always a good thing if you're bringing actions like this. And so, we feel very, we're in a contemporary conversation here. So that's enough from me. Thanks for all of you tuning in right now. I can see numbers increasing all the time. Now we have the legendary Joe Stiglitz, who many people will know is a Nobel Laureate, professor at Columbia University, and also the senior economist at the Roosevelt Institute. So now there's a pre-recorded presentation from Joe Stiglitz.
Thank you for this opportunity to address you on an issue which I think is of great urgency. I've been involved in climate discussions for a very long time, having served as a lead author of the IPCC report more than 25 years ago. The evidence then was overwhelming that action was needed and that it was urgent. We had to quickly curb greenhouse gas emissions. A quarter century later, much has happened. Our analysis was basically right, but flawed in several directions. We underestimated the pace of increase of emissions with the economic success of so many emerging markets. But that success came at a high price. We underestimated the cost too, more related to the severity and frequency of extreme events than the change in the average degree of temperature. But it's hard to recall, but respected scholars were scoffing at what difference would a couple of degrees of temperature on average make. We underestimated the other nonlinearities and tipping points in the climate process, the impact of the melting of the Arctic Ocean or the thawing of the tundra on climate change. And we underestimated the pace of innovation. That with just a little effort, we were able to develop renewable energy technologies that are close to or more competitive than fossil fuel. All of this means that the action is more urgent, but success is more achievable and will entail lower cost. There's much we don't know, but the international community has resolved that the risks of exceeding 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade cannot be justified by the likely cost of containment. There are some economists who claim otherwise, that we should accept 3.5 degrees or even higher. The models on which those conclusions are based, let me assure you, are based on a flawed normative framework, ignore key aspects of risk, and ignore inter- and intra-generational distributive effects. They do not appropriately take into account either constraints on government, nor the host of other market failures other than those associated with carbon. I believe that the international community, including the vast majority of the scientific community, are correct in their assessment that it is absolutely too dangerous to go beyond 1.5 or maybe 2 degrees centigrade. There are then two questions. What are the policies that will achieve these goals? Now widely centered around the operational objective of reaching net carbon neutrality by 2050. And how do we get governments to adopt those policies? On the first, there is now a widespread understanding that what is required is a package of policies entailing pricing, public investment, and regulation. Regulation designed both to directly curtail emissions and regulations that would encourage green investments. For instance, regulations that would require the disclosure of climate risk, encouraging people to focus on the critical risk associated with the changes in climate and to avoid the consequences of stranded assets by investing not investing in fossil fuels. I feel confident that we can devise policies that will, at relatively little or in fact no cost to our standards of living, succeed in the green transition. In fact, I would argue that it could be that these investments, the innovation that will be spurred, will open up significant increases in our standards of living correctly measured. The question, though, I want to turn to now is how, given current special interest and power relationship, we can achieve these policies that can, in turn, succeed in enabling us to address the climate crisis. The rights-based legal approach is one important way. Doing too little imposes enormous risks on future generations. Unfortunately, they have no say in this. Their voice is not heard in the normal democratic process. Only through a legal process that recognizes that there are rights of those not born can this be done. One manifestation of the disregard of future generations is the discount rate that is used in evaluating future benefits. The benefits of preventing climate change versus the cost of actions today. Under President Trump, the discount rate was 7%. That means that one wouldn't sacrifice more than 3 cents today to give a benefit of $1 to one's grandchildren in 50 years. The analysis of the social cost of carbon by the Obama administration, and now temporarily renewed by Biden, used a 3% discount rate, much better than a 7%, but still giving future generations short shrift. I don't believe that that kind of a discount rate can be ethically justified, can be economically justified. The consequences of caring too little about the future and ignoring risk is that we do too little. In economics, prices are key in giving signals. And those who are little concerned about climate change, those who would have us accept a 3.5-degree temperature change, suggest an appropriate price of carbon is quite low, something like $30 to $60 a ton. With those low prices, we'll have very little incentive to do anything. And with little incentive to do anything, we will do too little. More realistically, if we are to achieve the goals set by the international community of moving to net carbon neutrality by 2050, a price of $125 is what we will be required. The good news is that our economy can well accommodate that. It would not be dramatic. Indeed, the spur it would provide to the green transition would be healthy for the economy. There must be some way that our legal system can protect the rights of future generations. And I have been pleased to see the efforts of lawyers all over the world trying to find answers to this. The principle enshrining rights of future generations has long been recognized in the public trust doctrine, dating back to the Justinian Code. That doctrine holds that certain natural and cultural resources are preserved for public use, and that the government owns and must protect and maintain these resources for the public's use today and in the future. The principle has, I understand, been incorporated in the legal system of the United States and many other countries. The government has a fiduciary duty to preserve and protect the atmosphere for future generations. I also believe that the judicial approach can be reconciled with other legal doctrines, such as those associated with separation of powers that are very important in the United States. The court can oversee that the executive branch respects, for instance, in the processes by which it makes decisions, the rights of future generations and its obligations under the public trust doctrine. The extreme weather events that we have been experiencing in the last few years has brought home the immediacy of what is at issue. Action is urgent, but our horizon needs to be long run. It is the lives and well-being of generations to come. It is part of our duty to protect. And I hope the deliberations of this conference can open up new ways in which the legal process can protect the rights and well-being of those in the future generations. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. It'd be nice to have a conversation with him now, but it's enough for us to have had his words and insights, and many issues we may want to pick up again later during the course of our conversations, but just to highlight a couple. We've talked there about the discount rate, the politics of the discount rate, but also the possibility that maybe that is something that legal process could address. Talked about non-linearity in the problem, but also potentially in the solution. And so the role of law and policy to create, to enable and accelerate the deployment of technological solutions is one of the reasons why we have low cost renewable energies, because there were public policies in place to incentivize their development. And also the idea that institutions, central banks, treasuries could absorb the necessity of dealing with the climate change issue and start to tool and train and direct policies to that effect. It's quite interesting at the moment that there are women leaders of all the main economic institutions at the moment, and they're very, very knowledgeable about climate change. There are signs already, Christine Lagarde and Christina at the World Bank, that there's some appreciation of what those international economic institutions can do to guide and direct the solutions to climate change and put this combination of creativity and constraint into practice.